Okay, good morning. Welcome everyone to Apt Wealth Partners regular event series. Today we're talking about retirement. Stop thinking and start planning. Welcome to friends and family of Apt Wealth. Welcome to any existing Apt Wealth clients. You'll have heard this before, but you're welcome to listen again. I'm Andrew Dunbar, Director of Apt Wealth Partners, and I've been helping people plan and live their best retirement for over 20 years. I always look forward to this session, and I hope to share with you much of what I've learned over that time. Just some housekeeping to start with. You'll see a Q&A box in the bottom of your Zoom menu there. As we go along, just pop your questions in there, and we'll have plenty of time at the end to try and address as many of those as we can. And any we don't get to, we will be sending out a recording after the event, where we'll also try and answer those questions for you. We've also got a couple of polls today during the webinar, and they're totally anonymous. So I encourage you, please answer those as we go through. Really helps us to get some feedback from the room. Just a disclaimer to start with, the information today is general in nature, doesn't take into account your personal circumstances. You should always seek personal advice. All right, we're here to talk about retirement. And retirement is a topic that we at Apt Wealth love to talk about, and I love to talk about. We love living it with our clients, and retirement. What does it actually mean these days? Now, I looked up the dictionary. I'm a bit old school. I think most people now, if they want to find out how to tie their shoelaces or how to butter their toast, they might use ChatGPT. But I'm old school. I went to the dictionary. And when I looked up the word retirement in the dictionary, this is what it said: the act of leaving your job and stopping working, usually because you are old. Wow. Whack. So I don't know about you, but I think we've got to challenge that definition. That is not what modern retirement is. And the current statistics say that a 65-year-old couple, there's a 50% chance that at least one of them will be here right through in their late 90s. So we might not be doing jumping jacks, might not be flying around the world at that time, but we could be doing that in our 80s. And so that's a lot of life to live. And this is our favourite quote, which is, at your end, you'll regret the things you didn't do rather than the things that you did. And retirement is a time that everyone looks forward to. We think it's going to be a great time where we enjoy every day. We have the freedom to do what we want. But I think that we really need to start reimagining retirement. Life used to work. It was very binary. You studied, you worked for your career, then you retired, and then you died. But now in the new world, people study, they work, they go back and study, they have a career break, they go back to work, they go and do some more study, and then they end up working part-time in the prime of their life whilst hoping to enjoy that time as well. And that's more and more common. So, really, I think retirement, it's a time where we should be thinking of new beginnings, new successes, new experiences, and really building our legacy that we're going to leave behind. And I think the thing is, from our point of view and what we've seen, preparation is the key. Being mentally and financially prepared is what really gives you the freedom to do that. And unfortunately, it's a time that's not well planned for in general. And we see so many people that don't live their ultimate retirement lifestyle when there was no reason for them not to have. All right, so today we're going to talk through how much you need to retire. We're going to talk about what retirement looks like to you individually. We're going to talk about maximising superannuation and understanding your investments, which are two critical pillars. We're also going to talk about estate planning. And then we're going to talk about transitioning into retirement, because often it's actually the lifestyle and emotional transition into retirement that's more difficult than the financial. And then we'll talk about selecting the right partner to help you do that. Now, this is a stat that still staggers me every time I talk about this, and that is that 1 in 5 Australians think about retirement daily or often, which is amazing. But, we see this all the time. We hear it all the time. So we get it. There's a lot of change. There is a lot to think about. How much will I need? Will my money run out? Can I get the pension? They're all questions that people are asking. So if you're asking yourself those questions, don't worry, you're not alone. I think the problem generally is that most of us go through life. We do worry about these things, but then we just make some decisions, which are really just guesses, hoping that things will work out, right? But hope is not a strategy. And I say that again, hope is not a strategy. It's really proper planning that is the thing that alleviates this anxiety. So let's have a look at how much you need to retire. What I might do is ask a poll of the room at this time. So do we think retiring we need 300,000, 500,000, 750,000, a million or more? I'm going to activate that poll now, and I'd love to get the feedback from the room on what everyone thinks. So I'll launch that poll, take a few seconds to answer that. I'll put the results up on screen. So getting to retirement, what does the average couple need to live a comfortable retirement? A few more seconds. Okay, I'm getting a lot of answers come through, so I will end the poll there and share these results on screen. So we can see here, no one's gone right down at the lower end, but there's a mix of answers from 500,000 right up to more than a million. And that's really interesting. So thanks everyone for sharing that. And I think, when you look at the study, the official study by the Bureau of Statistics and Association of Super Funds, the figures that they say people need is $690,000 for a couple and 595,000 for a single. So this is for turning 65 to retire. So, based on those results that we just saw in the group today, comparing to that, I mean, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. And I think we need to ask ourselves, could you live comfortably with peace of mind for probably 30 years plus with that amount of money? And there is no right answer to that question, because the thing is that retirement looks different to everyone. And the answer is really based on your lifestyle, how you want to live your retirement, and what you want to spend each year. So coming up with your number is very important. And there's a range of things that are going to impact that, as we see here. What is work going to look like? Are you going to totally stop work? Are you going to keep bringing in some income by maybe working part-time? Are you planning to stay in the family home, or are you thinking about downsizing it? What sort of cars do you want to drive? Do you want one? Do you want two? Do you want a luxury Mercedes? Do you want a Toyota Corolla? What does travel look like? Do you want to travel around Australia in your caravan? Do you want to take the odd cruise, or do you want to fly around the world business class? And of course, the kippers, as I call them, kids in parents' pockets, eroding retirement savings. So what does helping children, helping grandchildren look like to you? And all of these things will impact what your number is. It's going to be your individual lifestyle that determines how much you need. So that's a critical part of us working with our clients, is firstly to try and determine what they want their life to look like, what that's going to cost them. And breaking those numbers down from the study by the Bureau of Statistics, this is what they say for a comfortable lifestyle per year. And a comfortable lifestyle is a good car, clothes, electronic equipment, eating out, regular domestic travel, and occasional overseas travel. And that study shows that a single person needs about $52,000 a year, and a couple needs just over $73,000 a year. But just because that's the average and what the study produces doesn't mean that's right for everyone. Everyone will be different. They also do that based on a very modest lifestyle, which is just getting by and paying for all the basics, which you can see there, 33,000 and 48,000 for a couple, which coincidentally is roughly the amount that the age pension brings in. So ideally, we don't want to be living just off the age pension. Okay, so based on those numbers, once we've determined what that number is, what you need to live off each year, we generally see two types of retirees. These are our clients. They come to see us. They've retired with a certain amount of money. Okay, so they've got a starting point. And for type number one, which is represented in the blue here on this graph, their money's invested, goes up and down each year with depending on the investments they're invested in. But what it does, it produces amount of income every year. And for these people, that amount of income is enough for them to live off and do all the things that they want to do. And the conversation with these people when they come in and see you, it's very much, oh, let us tell you about our latest overseas trip. Here's what our kids and grandkids are doing at the moment. Oh, we'd love to try and help out these charity organisations. You can tell they're just at ease with where they are with their money. They're not losing any sleep over it, and they're just getting on enjoying themselves, which is fantastic. And we all aspire for that type of lifestyle. Now, the second type of person represented in the red here starts with an amount of money. Again, it's invested, going up and down, but they need to spend more than the amount of income that it's generating. So what they're doing is spending the income and taking a little bit of their capital each year to top up and provide that lifestyle. Now that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually how the whole system was designed. We're meant to work our lives, build up superannuation savings, and then spend that through our retirement years. But it's very interesting when these people come in and see you, the conversation is much more like, oh, we'd really like to take a trip. Do you think we could afford one next year? Our kids are really battling with school fees and mortgages. Do you think there's any way we could help them out? Can you tell us about what's happening with these investments and the income we're generating? You can tell that money's playing much more on their mind. It's causing them stress, and they just can't get on and enjoy themselves. So whatever situation you're in, whether it's the blue, whether it's the red, I mean, our aim is to give you that level of comfort that we described by type one, and that is always possible with the right planning. Okay, so how do we actually do that? What's the process that we go through? There's generally a sensible checklist of things that we're looking at, maximising the amount that you've got in superannuation leading up to retirement, being tax effective so that every dollar is staying in your pocket where possible, accessing any government benefits that you're entitled to. Importantly, then, surviving market downturns, because we know things won't move in a straight line, and making sure that we're going to have an income that lasts your lifetime. These are the things that we work through, but really this is to achieve two things, and that is to give you peace of mind to live the lifestyle that you desire. And everything that you do in your planning is really about trying to achieve that. I think, if we've got those two things and we've got our health, then, what more is there? Okay, so once we know our number, we know what we need to do, we've got to decide where are we going to get this money from. And the options are the age pension, which, we don't want to be living just off the age pension, but it might be part of the picture. Superannuation, which is fantastic, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Savings that we might have put away, and investments. Well, so let's talk through some of these areas. Now, investments is a critical part of retirement, whether it's inside your superannuation or it's separate to superannuation, and the way that we structure those is important. So we're going to talk about this. Now, the first thing that I can promise you with investments is that there will be downturns during your retirement years, 100% guaranteed. And in fact, it's likely that there'll be a downturn every single year. And, we're 15 years or more now from the global financial crisis. Something like that will happen again at some stage, and every day that goes by, we get closer to that point. No one knows when it will happen, but I'm sure that something will happen again. And this chart, I think, does a really good job of explaining the reality of investing. So what we're looking at here, these grey bars year on year, are the annual return from the share market from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. Okay, so from start to end, what was the return? And you can see, on average, it's generally a healthy, positive number. It varies a bit from year to year. But what happens every single year is these red dots. And the red dots represent the biggest fall in the share market at any point during that year. Okay, so let's have a look at, say, 2012, 2013 on that graph, because they're both very similar. You can see those there. In both of those years, from the start to the finish, if you just stayed invested the whole year, you achieved a 15% return on your money, which is amazing. During that year, though, at different points in time, during 2012 and during 2013, the markets dropped by 10% and by 11%. So you can see that those market events, they are going to happen every year. And so what we've got to do is make sure we plan for those and have a plan to survive them. So let's talk about this, because this is really the number one fundamental principle that we see retirees make mistakes on, the way that they've structured their money through retirement. Have a look at this chart here. What this shows in the middle is a typical employer superannuation fund setup, where there is an allocation in maybe Australian shares, an allocation in international shares, some cash, some fixed interest, some property, typical type of balance fund, okay, represented by that pie chart there. Now, there's thousands of investors who are in that fund, and each investor owns a number of units in the fund. So, for example, we might own 1 million units in that fund. Each unit is worth $1, and so 1 million units at $1, that's our $1 million. And that's fine. And as we accumulate money, no problem. When we retire, though, what happens is we're actually selling down units in those funds, and we're gonna look at an example in a minute to highlight this, and this is where the problem really comes about. As opposed to around the outside there, very, very similar investments. We own some Australian shares, international shares, cash, fixed interest, property. But one, we can see exactly what we own. So that's comforting in itself. If I look at those two approaches, I can take comfort just from knowing exactly what I own. But two is how this protects us when there's a downturn. And that's the most important thing, and number one mistake we see people make. And let's have a look at an example to bring that to life. So we've got Max and Jane here. Now, Max has that approach that was represented by the pie chart, the balance fund type approach, whereas Jane, she has the approach on the outside where she owns all her own investments. So let's just think of global financial crisis Mark II happens. Both Max and Jane have $1 million in super. They're drawing out about $6,000 a month for their lifestyle expenses, and they spend that in full. So that's quite a high rate of drawing compared to that balance. Now, Max, he's got this unitized fund. So the trouble is he's selling units every month. If the investments drop in value, if the share market, property markets drop, the unit price drops. So if the unit price was $1, well, Max would be selling 6,000 units in that month to get his $6,000. But if we had a major downturn and now the unit price was, say, 50 cents, for example, now he'd be selling double. He'd be selling 12,000 units in that month to get his $6,000. And this is where the big problem lies. The share market will eventually recover. But by the time it does, Max has so many less units in the fund that he just doesn't recover his money. Now, contrast that to Jane, who has all of her own investments, very similar investments, but all the income, all the dividends that she earns is going into cash, and it's only from the cash account that she draws out her $6,000 monthly income. So it means she's not touching any of her investments, and she's got the time to leave those investments to recover back in value to what they were before and grow beyond. And so you can see here, if in this example, the share market had dropped by half and then taken 5 years to recover, by the time it recovered, Max only had 375,000 of his $1 million left. Whereas Jane, she's back to 838,000 and continues on as normal. Okay, so just that very simple structural change makes such a difference, and is probably the most important thing that we see for retirees to have that peace of mind and protection. Moving on to superannuation. So superannuation, it really is the last free lunch in Australia, and we know the government's doing a lot trying to tinker with the rules constantly. But as it stands, why is superannuation such a good investment? There's a number of reasons. Number one, on the way in when we're contributing, it is reducing our personal income tax. Okay, while the money's in there, it is being taxed, the earnings are being taxed very effectively at a reduced rate. We'll have a look at that. This point I think is important. It's for savings for retirement. And the way I see that is really, it's an enabler of people's lifestyle today, because I talk to a lot of 30 and 40-year-olds and they say, well, why would I bother with super? I can't access it for so long. It's the last thing that's on my mind. I don't care about it. Tomorrow's problem. But I see that totally wrong, totally around the other way, where if you know your superannuation is on track and going to provide you with what you need tomorrow, well, it enables you to live now with peace of mind and do all the things that you want to do. So I think that's really important. It's a very effective estate planning tool. We're going to have a look at that. And of course, once we get to retirement, it gives us tax-free retirement income. It's fantastic. So let's have a look at getting money into superannuation. What are the rules? How can we do that? And the aim really is leading up to retirement, we want as much money in super as possible. Two types of contributions we can make. They're called concessional or non-concessional. In layman's terms, it's before tax and after tax. So concessional contributions are what your employer puts in for you, or what you salary sacrifice, or perhaps what you put in and claim a tax deduction for. And you're allowed to do $30,000 per year of those contributions. Non-concessional, on the other hand, is after tax. So money that you've already paid tax on sitting in your bank account, plus a couple of other contributions like the government contribution and the spouse co-contribution. Now, non-concessional contributions, you're allowed to do $120,000 per year, or you can bring 3 years into one, so make $360,000 as a contribution, and then you couldn't contribute for the next 2 years. So there's some powerful ways to get a lot of money into superannuation in those last few years. So thinking about concessional contributions and just having a look at the advantages of doing that as opposed to taking that money as salary. These are the different tax brackets in Australia at the moment. And you can see there, the first $18,000 that we earn is tax-free. So if you're in that range, there's no advantage in making a concessional contribution to super, because it would get taxed at 15%. But thereon, there is quite a big advantage. And just looking at, say, the middle tax bracket there, 135 to 190,000, your salary would be taxed at 39 cents in the dollar, whereas going to superannuation, it's taxed at 15%. So there's a 24 cent in the dollar advantage by putting it in super. Of course, above 250,000, the government puts some extra tax on contributions, which it calls Division 293, which is why that benefit reduces a little bit, but still an advantage. Okay, so it's a really powerful tool to reduce tax and put more of the money in your pocket. Now, there's often a lot of confusion around the two phases of superannuation, accumulation versus pension. So let's just quickly touch on that. Accumulation is when you're working, contributing, building up your superannuation. And it's accumulation mode. The earnings are taxed at 15%, okay, which is still very attractive. Now, once we meet a condition of release, which is usually retiring, so once we retire, we can then move our accumulation, superannuation, over to the pension phase, which is where we have to start drawing out of it. Once we do that, there is zero tax on the earnings and zero tax on what we take out. Okay, so once we retire, basically the message is you want to be in that pension phase. Okay, now to compensate for being in the pension phase, the government prescribes that we must take out a minimum amount of our superannuation balance every year. And you can see those minimums there on the screen, which grow as we get older so that we're not building up more and more money in a tax-free environment. Now, some other ways to get money into superannuation, there's some very handy rules that are not always taken advantage of by people. And one is the catch-up concessional contribution rule. Now, this is really useful, particularly for, say, working mums where they've had a long period out of the workforce caring for children, trying to catch their superannuation balance up, or for self-employed people where they haven't been able to make the contributions they would have liked and trying to make headway in the last few years. So if your balance is less than 500,000, you can bring forward the last 5 years worth of unused contributions. Okay, so just having a quick look at how that would work. Excuse me. In financial year 21, let's say a person's limit was $25,000 in that year, and they made $15,000 contribution. Well, there's $10,000 unused that they could carry forward to the next financial year. So in FY22, instead of only being able to contribute 27,500, which was the cap that year, they can actually make 37,500. Now, if they made no contribution that year, well, that whole 37,500 would carry forward to the next year. And in FY23, they'd have their normal cap of 27,500 plus all that unused 37,500. So now they could put 65,000 in that year if they wanted to, so on and so forth, up to, say, financial year 25 there as an example, where they could have put in 107,500 into super before tax or as a tax deduction, which could be really useful. If you sold a business, sold a property, had a big capital gain, it could significantly reduce that, and it helps you obviously catch up your super balance. So that's a really good one. Other little ones, you want to take advantage of every opportunity you can. So the government co-contribution, if you earn less than around $60,000 a year, the government would match a contribution you make to super up to 50% and up to $500. If you put in 1,000, they'll put in 500 for you. The spouse tax offset as well is really useful. So if you've got a non-working spouse or a spouse that's on a lower income, less than $40,000, if you contribute to their superannuation account, you get a tax offset up to $540. So the maximum contribution there would be $3,000 to get that tax offset. Then the downsizer contribution rules, which have been extremely popular over the last few years. So if you sell your principal place of residence after reaching age 55, you can contribute $300,000 into superannuation per person. So if it's a couple, you can both do the 300,000 and therefore get $600,000 into super. And that's regardless of what the changeover price is. You could sell your property and actually pay more for the new property. You'd still qualify to put that money into super. And it doesn't count towards the $2 million cap. So normally we couldn't put money into super if we were at $2 million, but we can under the downsizer contribution rule. All right, so a lot of people using this to top up their superannuation before and into retirement. Okay, now we mentioned superannuation's a really good estate planning tool, but you've really got to be aware of the pitfalls. So let's have a look at this and how it works. Now, people often think in Australia we don't have death taxes, right? But by stealth, we actually do, and it is this superannuation beneficiary tax that's in place. So the first thing is that superannuation is not automatically an estate asset. We need to put in place what's called a binding death benefit nomination that directs the superannuation fund where to pay that money upon our death. Okay. Otherwise, if we don't do that, it's really up to the trustee of the superannuation fund where to pay that money. So we don't want to leave it in their hands. Now, if that money goes to non-dependents, which is often adult children, is the case here. So if the money was going to adult children, they would pay 17%, up to 17% tax on superannuation balance that they received, which can be a lot of money. Now, there are ways to reduce this tax. So this is something that you should be conscious of and speaking to your advisor about leading up to and in retirement. Let's just have a look at an example of how this would work. So we've got Tom and Jane who are 63. They've just retired. Jane's got all the superannuation, 720,000. She's rolled it over into a pension now, and that was all received by her employer as her super guarantee contribution along the way. Tom has no super. So if that was the case, once Jane and Tom pass away, I mean, firstly, if Jane was to pass away first, it would go to Tom. There's no tax consequences there. He's a dependent, so things just continue on. But once they both go, if that went to adult kids, they would pay 17% tax on those funds, which is $122,000. So a fair whack. So how can we reduce this? We can do what's called a recontribution strategy. Now, how long this is around for, I don't know, because the government is looking at tinkering with superannuation rules, and this could be something that does change. But at the moment, what we could do is Jane's retired, she's met a condition of release. We could withdraw all of her superannuation and put it in the bank account. Tomorrow, because they're under 75, we could use 3 years concessional contribution limit and do it in one hit for each of them. So 360,000 goes in for Jane, 360,000 goes back in for Tom. Because that money's going in as their own after-tax money now, it is now tax-free in superannuation. So that if and when Jane and Tom pass away, there would be no tax to the kids in that instance. So it's quite a powerful exercise that can really preserve the family's wealth. Okay, I just want to touch on Division 296 tax, otherwise known as the $3 million superannuation cap, whether or not it's relevant to you. It's getting a lot of media coverage at the moment, so I thought it's worth just quickly touching on it. Now, it's not before Parliament as we speak. We expect that will probably change over the next few weeks and it will go before Parliament. We don't know what the legislation's going to look like, so we're only guessing at this stage. But we do know that they put this into Parliament around 12 months or so ago. So if we think it'll be largely unchanged from that proposal, what it's doing is calculating an additional tax on the earnings for the portion of the balance that's above 3 million. So up to 3 million is exactly the same. It's an additional tax on the portion of the earnings for that part of the balance over 3 million. And the most controversial aspects of the previous proposal are that it won't be indexed. So whilst it doesn't impact a huge amount of the population right now, over the next decade, if it's not indexed, inflation will ensure that it does impact a lot of people. And also that it's taxing unrealized capital gains because it's just based on the balance from one year to the next, not the actual earnings that you're making. So we don't have a tax on unrealized capital gains anywhere else in our economy. This would be the only place. So that's what's creating a lot of controversy, whether or not you agree with the tax in the first place. Very quick look at a couple of examples just to give you some sense of what the impact might be. Again, the legislation could look totally different to this when it does reach Parliament again. So example one here, the balance at the end of the year, 30 June 26, assuming they bring it in this year and backdate it to the 1st of July, the balance that matters is the balance on the 30th of June 26. So let's say a person had 3.2 million at that stage. They started the year below 3 million. Bottom line is tax there of $2,813. So it doesn't seem like a big deal when we're at that sort of amount. As the balances go up, obviously the tax goes up. So in this example, we've got an end of year balance, 4.5 million, start of the year balance, 4 million. Additional tax paid in that instance would be $23,000. And the last example, without going too much into the detail, balance at the start of the year grows to a balance at the end of the year, 5 million. Tax is now around, or the additional tax is now around $60,000 for the year. Okay, that gives you some idea, but this is a highly personalised situation where you really need to speak to your advisor and plan for that if that's going to be the case. There are a range of other strategies that we've been working on in the background to reduce or eliminate that tax if that's important to people, which we can explore with you on a personal basis. All right. So we spent a lot of time talking about the financial transition into retirement. Again, if you've got any questions as we go along, please just put them into the Q&A box and we'll get to as many of those shortly at the end. But I want to spend a few minutes just talking about the lifestyle and emotional transition into retirement because this takes as much, if not more, planning than the financial side and is where we see a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty with people who make that transition. So what are you going to do in retirement? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want to achieve in retirement? What do you want your legacy to be? And going into time, a lot of people think this is going to be great. I've got freedom. I can do whatever I want. That sounds fantastic. But you can't play golf 365 days a year. And we've worked with thousands of families that have done this transition. We've seen the things that work, the planning, and how they've managed that. And when we think about retirement portfolio, usually people would think, well, we're talking about investments, we're talking about a superannuation portfolio, but I think the most important retirement portfolio is the portfolio of activities and things that are going to occupy our time in retirement, what we want to achieve. And it takes a lot of planning because when we move out of the workforce, we lose a lot of things and they may not be clear and evident at that time. Obviously, there's the activity of getting up and going to work every day, and we need to replace that activity in our lives. The social connection is huge. We are social beings and we need that social connection. And this is one of the areas where people struggle the most going into retirement, losing that social connection. So what are the hobbies that you're building? What are the daily activities, going to the gym or going for coffee or whatever it is that keep that social connection going? Having a sense of accomplishment We get that from our work, but once we retire, that can be difficult. So what other things are we going to involve ourselves? Is it sports, hobbies? Is it teaching, becoming a mentor to people, that give us a sense of accomplishment, having a purpose and direction. We get that from our workplace, and often we can lose that in retirement. So really thinking about, what do I want to get out of my life? What do I want my legacy to be? And giving yourself a sense of direction there. The routine and structure is just so important. People find this adjustment very difficult. So, how are you going to set up your day? What's your routine going to be? What time are you going to get up? What are you going to do in the morning? Are you going to go to the gym? Are you going to go to coffee? What's your day going to look like? And status is too, and is often something that's lost in this journey. And it's not necessarily about the self-esteem and feeling important, but it's about the impact that we have on other people, and how we improve the lives of others. So, how can we achieve that in the workplace? Often we're a manager, and we're helping all these young people develop their careers and be successful, and that gives us a great sense of satisfaction. So in retirement, how can we replicate that? Maybe we can join committees. Maybe we can become a mentor to younger people, whatever it is, that use your skills and strength. But really taking time to think about this stuff and build your retirement portfolio. And then I want to run another quick poll, because the next slide is my favorite slide of the day and talks about what's important in retirement. So what I'd like to poll the room on is, what's your number one aim in retirement? And I'll launch this poll. Is it to have enough money? Is it to travel the world? Is it to stay involved in work? Is it to maintain relationship with family and friends? Or is it to be happy? What do people think? Just give you a few seconds as those answers are trickling through. Okay, got a lot of answers there, so I'll end that now and I'll share the results with you. So we've got some people saying travel the world, some people saying maintaining relationships with family and friends, and then the bulk of answers in be happy. And I'm really pleased to see that. So look, this is my favourite slide of the day, and I love this. And I recommend you having a look at it if you haven't before. Bronnie Ware was an Australian palliative care nurse, and she took the time to interview those people who were in palliative care under her care before they died. And she wrote a book about the top 5 regrets of the dying. And it's not things that people would necessarily expect. The top 5 regrets were: I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. What were all the things that you missed out on that you regretted not doing because you worked so hard? I wish I stayed in touch with my friends. And this is, we just talked about how a lot of retirees lose touch with that, lose that social connection. Wish I let myself be happier. And I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Yes, there's a lot there about, living a life that others expect versus living the life that you want. And, she says, life's a choice. It's your life. Choose happiness. So, going into retirement, really thinking about that lifestyle emotional transition, building your retirement portfolio so that you can live a happy, fulfilled life with no regrets. That's really important. Then we translate that back to the financial side to make sure that we're prepared and have the peace of mind to go about and do all of those things. Okay, so going into retirement, people can try and tackle that journey by themselves, or they can get someone to help them. And from our perspective, Apt Wealth Partners, we have over 85 expert staff across the country looking after more than 3,000 Australian families going through this journey. We manage over $3.2 billion of funds for them. But, we also help them with all these aspects of their life, and we've got experiences of seeing the mistakes that people have made, and we can share that with people. So, something we're really passionate about, we love, and we'd love to help more and more people have a successful retirement journey. How we do that, the main aspects of retirement services, we want people to really understand their investments and be prepared. So we think that's a big aspect of having peace of mind and the freedom to do what you want to do. We want to maximise your retirement income, maximise any government benefits you can get, help you with not just the financial side, but also that emotional and lifestyle transition, surviving market downturns that we know are going to occur, and all designed to ultimately live the lifestyle that you desire. Okay, so that is the end of our presentation today. Thank you for sticking with me. I know that there's a lot covered as we work through all of that, but I encourage you to sit down with an advisor and have a chat about your personal circumstances. Got some time for question and answers, so I am going to have a look through the Q&A box. You can keep putting in more questions now as we go through some of these questions, if you like. I'll start off, got a question here. If I had over $500,000 in my superannuation, can I eliminate the beneficiary tax? Good question, because the example we looked at was using the exact limit of 360,000. So in the case where you had 500,000, we couldn't eliminate it all in one go. We can take out 360,000, we can put 360,000 in, but then that stops us doing anything for the next 2 years. So there's still going to be a little bit of tax in that remaining balance at that time. But once we click over that 3-year period, we could do it again. You take out 360,000 up to and put it back in again. And in that way, we should be able to eliminate that beneficiary tax. And obviously, the higher the balance is, the more times we might have to do that over time. There is a whole bunch of restrictions, age limits, etc. So it's not possible for every single person to do this, but for most people, it can make a lot of sense. Got another question here. I have an allocation to shares in my superannuation, but I don't think I own my own shares. Is it possible to own your own shares in superannuation? Yes, it is. Absolutely. Most superannuation funds will allow you to own your own shares in superannuation. It's just that difference, as we looked on that chart, between having it all tied up in one where you don't know what's in there versus having it broken down and you know exactly what you've got. So you can definitely do that. Do I need a self-managed fund to hold those investments? No, you don't. It's one option, absolutely, and it's a good option, but it's not for everyone. So there's plenty of other superannuation funds where you can employ that structure, and it's really based on individual circumstances. Is this presentation going to be available online? Yes. After we finish today, the recording will be sent out to all participants and available online. That looks like most of our questions for today, so thank you very much for that. I'll close off there. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. If you've got any questions that arise out of today, you can contact us directly. If you already have an Apt Wealth advisor, you can go straight to your Apt Wealth advisor. If not, you're welcome to contact me in the first instance. Wish you a good day. Keep an eye out for any of our upcoming webinars where we cover a range of topics that our clients tell us are important to them. Thanks for being with us, everyone.